So hey everyone, behind me today I have Macrina the Younger, who is the sister of Gregory of Nyssa and of Basil the Great in Cappadocia. So she, along with Gregory Theologian, are the four Cappadocians. She often doesn't get mentioned, so there's three Cappadocians, but it's well agreed that she was the equal of the others in her capabilities and her knowledge. She just was more behind the scenes. And I've been thinking a little more about my post from yesterday about how these icons have this flatness, this two-dimensionality, and how in Orthodoxy we see that as a window. And it's as much as we're looking at them, they're looking back at us, and the perspective of that flatness gives that feeling of them looking into our world, and how that sort of plays interestingly into the idea that that these in physics, that information can be stored on the surface of a three-dimensional object. So the information is stored in two dimensions on a three-dimensional object, and how by projecting that information back into three dimensions, you can recreate the reality of the information in three dimensions, or you can create it's not an illusion. The reality is a good way of putting it, but it's a different reality. There's a reality of the two-dimensional, and then the reality of the projection. So a hologram is a real thing. Its information is contained on the two-dimensional surfaces that project it into existence. And then an interesting implication of that is the hologram is its dimensions are unknown. It's a relational object. There's at least two-dimensional projections that are producing the three-dimensional hologram, and that if you move the projectors farther apart, the hologram gets larger, or that its dimensionality becomes an observational thing, not a fact. So the fact of the information lies on the surfaces, and the projection leads to relationality. So, and then that, I didn't talk about it yesterday, but I was thinking further about it, that one of the big problems in physics also is that we can't seem to quantize gravity. We can't give it a number, a unit, in terms of its force or in terms of its action. It's not really a force; it's a warping of space-time, but it's non-quantizable. It appears to be non-quantizable. That's the big problem with unifying the theories in physics, the strong and the weak and the electromagnetic forces, with gravity into one unified theory of everything. So that hasn't been possible because of the problem of gravity being such a different thing. It appears to be a non-quantizable thing. The graviton, which would be the vector particle of a quantized gravity, hasn't been observed, and doesn't appear to be any easy way of quantizing it. We've been waiting 100 years for that, so it hasn't happened yet. It appears to be non-quantizable. So it's a relational activity. It's the relation of warping of space-time, and it changes depending on the observer. This is general relativity, right? This is there's nothing new here, but it does fit nicely into this idea that the universe, if it is a holographic creation of information stored on the expanding edge of the universe, expanding from the initial state, quantum state, through the Big Bang, and now, well, who knows, 70 million or 70 70 billion light years across, something like that. Anyway, that idea of the relational aspect of gravity could be because of that idea that the information that's in the world is not contained in the three-dimensional that we see, but it's contained in the two-dimensional of this expanding. And this is a fairly old theory of how things might be, but it continues to move along. It hasn't been disproved. It seems to be something that might be. And then my observation that when I entered the Orthodox Church, the first time I walked into one, what was it, 18 months ago or something like that, and noticed these icons and having an understanding of perspective in drawing and in painting from my mother, who's an artist. I was immediately noticing that aspect of this two-dimensionality and how the entire liturgical space is surrounded by these icons. And if you think of them as existing on that, in that plane with God, in that edge of the universe where the information is all stored, and that place we can't know because it's beyond. It's further out than the light that we're receiving back from the universe can travel. So there's no way to know it. It's an unknowable thing. That what is going on there. We can simply derive from, if this is our hologram, or if this is that sort of idea, we can derive facts about it from what we see. So that idea that these icons being windows of various people who have died and their souls have gone to commune with God and the information edge of the universe, right, are in effect creating the liturgy that is being performed in the room, or they're a partial window on it. It's just to me it's a very interesting way of seeing how that old way of representing what heaven would be like. These saints and these icons are looking at you from that heavenly world, from that world of complete known information, back into our world of incomplete knowability. We can't know that and that they're recreating our space. And in the case of the saints, they're in the liturgical atmosphere. They're in a way creating the atmosphere of the liturgy. Now that's, this is a very sort of incomplete kind of a thing, but but I like the way, coming from a scientific background and coming from a physics family, I suppose you might say, it's quite nice. It's a quite nice idea, I think. And whereas the idea that that where a hologram is kind of like off-putting, I guess, or like really, and the idea that these two-dimensional objects that are surrounding a liturgical space are helping to create the very event that's going on by projecting from their all-knowing place effectively a hologram in our world. So our earthly existence is a higher dimensional, and that I like that too, because it fits in with this idea that the unknowability of God is because of his utter simplicity. And if God is existing in a lower dimensionality than we are, that would be sort of the idea of a higher simplicity. We think of two dimensions as fundamentally simpler than three dimensions, and we live in at least four dimensions. We have time, and does that edge of the universe have a time associated with it? Well, that's difficult to know. But if they don't, if time doesn't exist in that, and where all that information is stored, then we're in a four-dimensional, and that is a two-dimensional. And so it's layers away from our being able to know it from the point of view of us in a three-dimensional world. What is a if we're in a four-dimensional world, what is a two-dimensional existence? We can't. It's flat and it doesn't exist in time. So it's a pretty remote kind of a thought. And then there's gravity, and in string theory, one of the ideas is that gravity is the sort of a slight unraveling of a fifth dimension. So generally in string theory, we have four dimensions: the three spatial and time, and then we have six. Generally 10 is agreed upon. Sometimes they say 11. 10, 11 doesn't. What does it matter? The others are all wrapped up for very, very small. They're Planck distance, so 10 to the negative 30 meters, so nothing we need to worry about. But there's an idea in string theory that gravity is actually a slight unraveling of this fifth dimensional thing. But dimensions are generally thought to be measurable, and so since gravity is non-quantizable, and I think there's an issue there. It demands that gravity be quantized, I believe, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen. And what I'm getting at with all this is, if that's right, then we exist in a five-dimensional, the four plus this gravitational dimension, the space-time warping dimension, and I suppose we would think that storage of information on the edge is not experiencing gravity the way that we are. We don't, think of that. So the point of all this is that the simplicity of God and the utter unknowability of God is because God is existing on a lower dimensional plane, and through whatever mechanism it is, and I suppose we can't know, he projects the worldly existence in a higher dimension, in more complexity, and then we have this idea of we're in a mighty complex state, and that we're sort of in this fractal complexity. And as you go down the fractals, might maybe say go down the dimensions, you eventually end up in with God at a lower dimensional, and a fractal that's in the simplest state that it could be. That the information can't reside on a lower dimensional plane, so it's the simplest state that it can be, and we're residing in a much higher dimensionality. Because of this projection into existence, this sort of holographic projection. So, like all of that, theologically, it seems to be a pretty good way of, if you're going to try to discern what's going on, we can't discern God. And I think this all has to do with the quantum nature of the information. We see quantum as probabilities, and we live in this higher dimensional universe that's thermodynamic, and our universe has an arrow of time, and the quantum doesn't. So we don't know how one leads to the other, but it may be that idea that the quantum is entirely probability is simply because we don't know the reality of that lower dimensional space and place, and nor can we. And from the point of view of a projection, we just exist. We exist in this state, and looking back, we see the quantum as being probabilistic, but perhaps it's not. How would we know? Anyway, that's a lot of musing on all of this. Again, I don't see any problem with this in orienting towards Christianity, and it all seems must seem very coming from a very outside angle, but but I'm well inside the church, and I don't see any issues with thinking this way, and perhaps being able to integrate the religion in with a more modern materialism, using known physics and to get at the unknowability, but the ultimate creation of the universe from that unknowable creator, and our universe being a relational aspect to those lower dimensional, all-knowing, to that lower dimensional all-knowing God, simply by the necessity of the holographic projection. It's an entirely relational thing. So relation is the world that we live in, and relation is, as I've been saying on Christian Baxter's channel for a couple of episodes, I laid out how we can get from the idea of relation to the idea of love to the idea of God. We go through that at length. There's maybe 4 or 5 hours of video on Christian Baxter's channel. So anyway, that's a lot. That's enough for today. Bye.